Hi everybody, welcome to our live talk at IndoGerman Films. Please give a warm round of applause for our guest today, the wonderful Alankrita Shrivastava. First, I have to introduce my two co-hosts. This is Anjana Singh from AMIKAL. Hello, Anjana.
Namaste, Stefan. Namaste, Alankrita. Namaste, Raman.
And then we have the co-host from Radio Apna, Frankfurt. This is Raman. Hi, Raman.
Hi, Stefan. Thank you for introducing. Hi, Alankrita ji. Nice talking to you.
Hello.
Hi. So let's start with some questions now, Alankrita. Yeah, Alankrita Shrivastava, born in New Delhi, moved to Dehradun, where she studied at Welham Girls' School. Then moved back to Delhi and graduated from Lady Shri Ram College. Well, you studied filmmaking, Jamia Milia Islamia in New Delhi. Well, now, besides your filmmaking studies, in your younger days, you were mostly surrounded by a woman-friendly environment. So do you feel that it has impacted your work later in the film industry somehow?
Yeah, for sure. And just to go back, I wasn't born in New Delhi. I was actually born in Allahabad. And I lived a lot in Bihar. And I was in a boarding school, which is why I went to Dehradun. So I actually lived a lot in Bihar and then I moved to Delhi. So yeah, definitely. I think, my early years had a very huge impact and influence on my life in terms of, I read a lot of books written by women. I went to an all-girls boarding school. I did my graduation from Lady Shri Ram College, which is an all-girls college. And so I think I was dealing with a lot of feminist discourse from like a very early age. I also come from a family where there are very strong women in my family, my grandmother, my mother, my younger sister. So I think overall, of course, I feel all of this has played like a huge part in the sort of choices I make and the stories that I tell.
Yes. And I mean, when the stories that you have written, the movies that you have made, it somewhere reflects that strong feminism in there. And I think it's really nice that a person like you is actually touching all those topics that are really important to be brought in front of others. Yeah. With that, let me move to my second question here now. After your studies got over, you moved to Mumbai to pursue a career in filmmaking. And you soon started working as associate director for none other than Mr. Prakash Jha. So how did you get associated with him? I mean, what is the story behind you getting associated with Mr. Prakash Jha so early?
Actually, Mr. Jha used to do a lot of, he had taken a hiatus from film in the middle and he was doing a lot of social work in Bihar. And my mother, I used to live in Bihar at that time, and my mother used to work with the UN. So she actually knew him. They knew each other through all the sort of social work they were doing, and so he had become a friend of my mother's. And so when I was finishing from Jamia, actually I was planning to go to Bombay, and then that's when his film was starting. He was starting work on Ganga Jal. So I think, so he knew that, I met him and then he asked me what I'm planning to do. So I was like, I'm planning to move to Bombay to work in film. And he's like, well, I'm working, I'm starting this film called Ganga Jal. So if you want, you can come and intern with me, which is how I ended up, in fact, I hadn't even finished my exams. I went in the middle of my exams. And I moved to Bombay, and I actually didn't even move that time. I went straight to the sets of Ganga Jal, and I started working as the junior most assistant over there, and it was really quite exciting. And after that, there was really no looking back, because it was literally like I was the junior most assistant on Ganga Jal, but after that I was the chief assistant on Apharan, and then then we ended up I kept working on many other projects. I'd moved to Bombay by then. And I think the main thing is that I found I really liked his cinema because it was realist. Like it had a sort of, and it also spoke of things that mattered to him, like the socio-economic realities and the political realities at the grassroots level. So I think I found a resonance in that kind of cinema, and I think I enjoyed the fact that he really was very keen to have his own voice, and he had a particular kind of cinema, and I think that really encouraged me to look inwards And I think I really give him credit for that, that he really encouraged me to look inwards to find what it is that I want to say and express through the films that I write and make. So I think it was, yeah, that's kind of how it played out.
Yeah, no, I can definitely say. I mean, movies like Ganga Jal, Apharan, Rajneeti, where you were also involved in those movies. I mean, very realistic movies. The movies that actually bring truth in front of others, and I think somewhere that cinema needs more airtime on the big screens, I would say. Yeah, with that, I'll actually give back to Stefan now. Stefan.
Yeah, so my question is because, you know, looking at your films, I know very well, like Lipstick Under My Burkha and your work for Made in Heaven, you're huge talent. So you're so gifted and talented filmmaker. So how was it before you did the assisting job for Prakash Jha? So did you do small films, or what did you do in your youth? Have you been a filmmaker before and somehow, or did you write stories also? How did you train your talent before you moved to Bombay?
You know, I went to, I did my graduate degree in mass communication at an institute called Jamia Milia Islamia. And straight from there I came and I sort of started working. So I did know I wanted to work in films, which is why I started assisting. So I assisted on this film called Ganga Jal, another film called Apharan. I assisted on a documentary. I was executive producer on 2 films. And in the midst of all that, so I was very busy. And I think as a young woman living in Bombay, I was just like working all the time. So I knew I wanted to be a filmmaker. But it was only, I think, in 2008 that I actually wrote my first feature film called Turning 30. And I was not yet 30. So it was like, you know, I was kind of preempting how I'll feel in like a couple of years. So I wrote that film and I shot it, I think, about a year later. And then it released in early 2011. But I think that was a reality check for me because I realized, you know, till then it was all very theoretical in my head that, you know, there are very few women occupying cultural space as filmmakers in a country like India. But I think after turning 30, it really hit home because I had to struggle so much, you know, to get the film out. And, you know, like, and I feel people didn't understand where that film was coming from. It felt like, you know, like it's not like it did really well at the box office, nor was it some great critical success. But it was really the film that I wanted to make. It was true to who I was at that time, what I was going through, and I'm still very proud of that film. But I think it was really like a sort of learning lesson for me because I realized it's everything that they say about how hard it is for women to tell their stories is actually true because it's like there is so much systemic resistance to women's stories, especially that was like, what, 10 years back. So, so then I think like after that is when I started understanding many things. And then it was really hard for me to actually make Lipstick. It took many years. I was trying to make another film, trying to mount that film. That didn't happen. And then I had Lipstick. And it was really a struggle to, you know, sort of get it made. And then again, like a struggle to sort of release it for different reasons. I mean, in terms of, again, the same, you know, like there's no distribution system in place which accommodates stories which are told from a female point of view about women. And then, of course, I had the whole censorship issue as well, where the film was banned in India. So I feel like, I guess it was a lot of growing up. I think it was very easy in a certain sense for me to make my first film. But I think by the end of making that film, I realized what I had sort of taken on. And also because I think I thank Mr. Jha for that, because I think he did encourage me to just stay on my own path, whatever it was. And he was like, you don't have to try to cater to, you know, a sensibility that's not yours, or try to tell stories that don't mean anything to you. So I think like that decision that I will just tell the stories that I want to tell and make the films I want to make in an environment which doesn't encourage the female perspective has been, and it continues to be, I must say, I've made like another film called Dolly Kitty or Wo Chamakte Sitare, Dolly Kitty and Those Twinkling Stars, which was scheduled to release this year, and we are figuring out about the release now. But so that it just continues to be like a hurdle, I feel like. So I feel like there is still so much resistance to the female point of view. But yeah, I'm glad I took this path. And yeah, so in that sense, sorry, going back to what your question was, I was so busy working until turning 30 that I wasn't thinking so much. It was the first complete feature film script that I wrote. And that was my first film. I hadn't really written a film before that. I'd made one short film called Open Doors, which went to a couple of festivals. And that was about it, apart from my film school. And of course, but I was working constantly on a set. So I think the good thing was, I think, because I was just working consistently as an assistant director, as an executive producer, I was really in the heart of things in terms of execution. So I think I was very comfortable being on set. I knew how to make things happen, even when you have lesser money. I understood the system. I knew how to make things function on a set. So I think in that sense, I was really well equipped, but I must say I hadn't given that much time and thought to the kind of stories I wanted to tell. That's something I started doing only post turning 30.
Regarding learning the filmmaking process, so the writing, direction, and so on. So after all what you learned from your perspective now, if you have a wish free, what would you change, or what would you wish for your following young filmmakers? If I understood it right, so mass media communication doesn't mean that you do films during your studies, or did you?
We did actually. We used to. So that course is quite comprehensive. It had puppetry, it had street theater, it had sound production, radio production, photography. We did like television, digital projects.
Okay.
We also shot on film. We learned how to use a film camera. So in that sense, it was like a jack of all trades kind of a course, but it did help because I think it really opened up my mind about how to look at culture and how to just see the world. And before that, I did my master's. I graduated with a degree in journalism. So I think even that was kind of helpful because it was all going somewhere in the same direction. But if I had to tell young filmmakers who are starting out now, I think things are very, very different because, when I started working, and I finished my course and I came to Bombay, there was no option, but it was like you start off as an assistant and you sort of work your way up. That was a system in India, and all my friends and contemporaries who are filmmakers, we all started our careers like that. But I think now things are very, very different because technology has changed. And, so I would suggest that I think it's really great to do some kind of a course, either, in filmmaking or writing, whatever one is interested in. It does help because you're a little bit more oriented towards, not that it gives you like all the answers or anything, but I feel it just opens your mind up a bit. So I think to do a course, but I would say that it's important. I feel like I started thinking too late, like not too late, but I took a long time before I actually got down to writing. Though of course I'd start doing it in my late 20s, but I feel like before that I was just too busy, like just working as an assistant. So I would suggest that if people want to be filmmakers now, you don't need to wait that long and all that. So I feel like people should maybe assist on 1 or 2 films just to get an idea to see how like the system works. But I think it's good to focus on writing short films, and now there are a lot of avenues to get them funded, to write short films and make them, and really just keep evolving by writing and shooting. I think that is more helpful than anything else. And I think you learn best if your aim is to be a storyteller, like a filmmaker. I think you learn best by making more and more films. So I would say start early and just keep doing it. And I think like the real thing that you need, I feel, to be a filmmaker, I don't know about the West, but in India, is definitely emotional resilience. Because, there's a lot of rejection, things don't go the way you want them to. Also, there is no proper funding for independent cinema. So if your voice is slightly alternative, now things are much better because they're digital platforms. But there's always this negotiation of how to get resources to make your film, how to make it come out. So there are a lot of like hurdles that sort of come up. But I think like to sort of stay the path and continue to, work towards telling your story, I think that's really important. So I think that I feel most people are very talented and they all have like, vision and stories and characters that they want to sort of, reveal to the world. But I feel like the people who have the resilience to continue to be able to not, to not get defeated by the obstacles on the way, I think they are the ones who actually end up surviving. So I think talent, I think everyone has talent actually. I think it's really about having, not giving up along the way.
Yeah, and listening to all what you said is, I think it's also, it's hard work, it's not just the talent, it's also hard work. So you get a good script not only by sitting there and having a few ideas, it's a lot of work.
Yeah.
Anjana ji, next question goes to you.
हार्ड वर्क के साथ साथ फिल्मों को एक समाज का आईना होना चाहिए ताकि हम सामाजिक दुर्व्यवहारों पर विचार कर सकें। और आज भी भारत में लोगों को ऐसी फिल्में देखने का मौका नहीं मिल पाता। इसका मुख्य कारण क्या है? क्या हम खुद दोषी हैं जो एक मेन स्ट्रीम फिल्म को तो 4-5 बार देख के आ जाते हैं, लेकिन एक छोटी अच्छी किसी सामाजिक मुद्दों पर बनी हुई फिल्मों को हम सिनेमा घरों तक ही नहीं पहुंचा पाते हैं?
Let me translate that in English now. So, I mean, film should show the reality. So reality is something that is very important to be brought in front of all. So why do we still shy away from such topics? I mean, we can watch a mainstream movie multiple times, but it's not that we go and watch movies that really talk about some really relevant topics. So are we somewhere responsible for it?
So, it's a really, really interesting question because first of all, I think that at the base of it, film is not a public service message. It's not. I really don't believe that a film necessarily has to have a social message. I think a film needs to somewhere deepen an understanding of something, of humanity in a certain way, like make you think about something else, or like view the same situation differently. But eventually it needs to have, I mean, as a filmmaker, personally, I feel like the film needs to create a sense of empathy with the characters, something you have to sort of feel. And I feel like there will always be all kinds of cinema, so there will always be films which are more like escape. I mean, I'm talking about a country like India, which will be more escapist, films which will be more like spectacular, films which will be more which will lead you to introspect, and films which will challenge the status quo. But at the heart of it, I feel like I don't think that it should be the message necessarily that should be the USP of drawing the film, drawing people to watch a film, because I don't think that that's sustainable. And at the end of the day, I don't think people want to watch films for a moral science lesson like that. But I think that the politics of the filmmaker always comes into the film. And I think there should be honesty in how you sort of make the film. And definitely, I feel like there has to be something interesting about the film for people to be able to sort of watch it. What has happened in a country like India is that because of the way the whole system of mainstream cinema has functioned, that the resources have always, whether it's marketing resources or whatever it is, the resources of cinema have always gone to films which promote the status quo, which are very mainstream, and they don't challenge the audience to necessarily think in a different way. There are always exceptions, but by and large. So it is like a cinema which makes you forget about reality and, focus on other things. And independent cinema often tends to be more realistic and also tends to challenge how you look at things, and also tends to show you a truer picture of life. which sometimes is not very comfortable for the audience. But the thing is, what has happened is that the skew has been so much, whether it's like all kinds of resources, even the creation of the male hero, etc. It's a very systemic sort of way in which a certain kind of cinema has always been promoted. And that has led to, like audiences also, I feel they are not aware. So they will go and watch like a mainstream Salman Khan film, but they may not go watch a film like Masan. So I feel like, and that's because all the marketing money, etc., all of that is not getting directed and not being used to push smaller, more interesting films. So I think it's a very, very complicated sort of reason, but definitely I feel the audience should ideally choose to watch all kinds of films, which they don't. But I feel it's not just the audience, it's the whole system is pushing the audience into a certain sort of direction. But I do feel that with the streaming platforms coming in, things are changing, because suddenly, like, there is now a new space, and that space has, people who are telling stories without like a big star cast or everything, and things are often driven really just by the storytelling itself. People also getting to watch a lot of international content. So I feel like it's become like a space that is opening up the audience to a different kind of cinematic space. So I think now maybe, I don't know, because right now we're really at the cusp of a lot of change, because of this entire COVID crisis, because cinemas are shut, everyone's only watching stuff on the streaming platform. So we don't really know what's going to happen to the taste of the audience post, this year. But one does hope that, there is more support for independent cinema. And I think that's really, really lacking in India, because, there's no support like that. And neither are there cinema chains specifically devoted to smaller films, nor are there any studios that are specifically making smaller films. So basically, you're just constantly fighting for the same resources, fighting for the same interest from the audience. So I think like that culture does need to be developed, but hopefully with the OTT space, I don't know, like something is shifting.
Can I add a question here? Yeah. I mean, after listening to you, Alankrita, I somewhere feel that there is also some kind of a demography in India where masses are still struggling on daily basis. And I guess when people go to watch a movie, they are looking for a larger than life character where somebody will come and actually put up a show in front of you where you start believing that the problems will go away. And there is still a selective audience that really want to see the movies which talk about problems on top of problems that people have. So is it also playing some kind of a role in how the mainstream movies are getting promoted and the real movies which talk about real issues are not being accepted by the people?
See, I think that we are a really large population. We are like almost 1.3 billion people. So I think that there are enough people who would be interested in a more middle of the road cinema, or a cinema
promoted, and the real movies which talk about real issues are not being accepted by the people.
Sorry. So I feel like there's enough, of a population in India that there can be space for all kinds of films. And definitely, I think the tendency to think that the audience will not understand the film is also, I think, somewhere propaganda that has been created for the whole system to work in a certain way. So I feel we also give the audience very little credit. And the audience has also now been sort of programmed into reacting, in a certain way. So I think it's not one or the other. I think it's like smaller films need to be pushed. Audiences need to be educated about these kind of films, as in, informed about these films, so they also know that these films exist. And of course, they have to go in, when cinema halls open, or they have to actually go to the theater and pay for those films. But it's also that I feel there is enough of an audience in India to have like audiences which might prefer one kind of film over the other. So I think it's really about managing to get that audience, into the theater, which is why like there are a lot of issues actually, like pricing of tickets. You know, should like a big budget mega star kind of film, you know, that has a high price ticket, but then why should a small film also be ticketed, you know, with the have the same sort of price? Shouldn't like, you know, that these those tickets shouldn't those tickets sort of be priced at a lower, in a lower category? So there are a lot of systemic issues which all sort of collide into this thing, and then basically you find that there's not enough support for smaller films.
I have a direct question to that, Alankrita. How was it with Lipstick and My Burqa? Because in Germany at our festival, it was a huge success. So we had like 4 packed screenings. So how was it in India? Because the release in Germany was even before it was in India. I think it was 1 week or 2 weeks we have been in advance. It was in, what was it, 2017, correct? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you know, so we were very fortunate actually with Lipstick. It's one of the few independent films that did really well at the box office. And the return on investment was one of the highest returns on investment on any film that year. But you know, like there are very few independent, like Lipstick was one, and Newton was another film that year that did really well, which was again an independent film that did really well at the box office. But you know, it's very few and far between. And I'm very glad and very grateful, you know, that the audience really supported the film. But you know, like it's not the norm. The norm is that people don't end up going. You know, I'm like really happy they went for Lipstick. But even then, like now when I look back, I can say that of course, you know, if an audience is oriented in a different way, the kind of success we could have had even more commercial, you know, like a the film could have made even more sort of money if this whole system was different. But considering the system, we did really well. But you know, like why should it be such an exception? The thing is, Lipstick was an exception to the rule, and I feel like the rule itself should change. I mean, I feel like independent, smaller films should, you know, have like an equal. I mean, they should have a sort of level playing field. So. I guess that's what one is constantly fighting for, because you know there are also lots and lots of wonderful smaller films, and they don't necessarily end up doing so well. And the thing is that when smaller films do well, it also of course gives encouragement to the studios to fund more such films. So it's like if the audience supports a certain kind of cinema, then they will get more of that kind of cinema. But if they keep supporting only like, you know, girl and boy fall in love, go around the tree, then only that, you know, that kind of cinema will get more resources. But an interesting thing has happened the last few years, that there is, even in what is considered mainstream, there has been a slight shift. There is like more these medium budget kind of films which do touch upon certain, yeah, they're a bit slice of life, and they touch upon certain important, they raise us, you know, some important issues. So there is, I think, a slight shift happening, and it's a very welcome sort of change.
Anjana?
You're on mute, Anjana ji.
हम बात करते हैं आगे, फिर लिपस्टिक अंडर माय बुर्का की ही बात करते हैं. एक तरफ वह फिल्म और फिल्म फेस्टिवल में पूरे विश्व में अलग अलग पुरस्कार जीत रही थी, और दूसरी तरफ अपने ही देश में सेंसर बोर्ड से सर्टिफिकेट नहीं मिल रहा था उस फिल्म को. तो क्या दुनिया के सबसे बड़े लोकतांत्रिक देश में आज भी सेंसर बोर्ड की जरूरत है? क्या हम अपने फिल्मों के माध्यम से अपने विचार को जनता के सामने बिना किसी कट के नहीं ला सकते हैं? ऐसे कट की हमें क्या जरूरत है आज?
So let me translate that in English for the audience. So Lipstick Under My Burqa, it got appreciation worldwide in many international film festivals. Now, on the other hand, in India, the movie could not release on its date because there were objections from censor board. Now, in current times, we are the largest democracy in the world. So do we still need censorship on the movies? Can't we openly show the people what we actually want to show without any cuts coming from censor board?
Yeah, so it's very interesting that India is such a large democracy, and you know, we have such a draconian censorship law. And I think I also, though I had dealt with the censor board earlier for other films, I also didn't realize how bad censorship can be in India, where, and when lipstick, they just outright banned the film. They just refused to certify it. It was very odd. And I think for me, I sort of woke up to the fact that it had two issues, not just freedom of expression, but also like who is free to express themselves. And it suddenly hit me that such few, which is what we were talking about earlier also, that there are such few films made, from the female point of view, that the moment you want to tell a story that somehow seems uncomfortable to a very patriarchal structure, they suddenly find the film objectionable to the extent that they feel it should be banned altogether. So I think I realized that, India is a democracy, but that democracy has to be made real by the struggle of India's citizens. And as a woman, I felt, and especially as a woman female filmmaker, I felt that whatever is written in the Constitution of India, it's there on paper, but I have to fight for that freedom. I have to fight to have that that right to express the story that I want to tell, to make the film that I want to make. And I think it was really a reality check, because also it's very odd that if you're 18 years of age, you can vote, which is a much more important thing to do. You're electing your leaders. But even if you are over the age of 18, you cannot watch whatever you want to watch. It must go through the censor board. I think it's, I don't believe in censorship at all. And I feel that if, in any democratic country, you can do certification, and technically the board is only supposed to certify in the sense, but of course, actually it's a censor board, and they ask you for cuts, and they ask you to mute things, or they can ban things altogether, like in my case. But I definitely feel in a democratic country, there is no place for censorship, and there should just be certification, and people should just be able to see whatever they want to see. Also, the problem in India at that time was that this censorship was also, I felt, being used to stifle a feminist voice and to promote patriarchy, to just keep perpetuating the status quo. And I think I had a big problem with that, because I felt there was a lot of double standards and hypocrisy in that kind of a decision, which is why we did fight it out. I did have to make a few small cuts before the final release, but I was able to release the film after 6 months of fighting. But I think it's important for citizens in any democracy to keep speaking up, because it's all too easy for whatever is written and guaranteed on paper to be in actual practice, for your rights to be trampled upon by the ruling authorities. So it's very important as citizens to keep questioning. Otherwise, it's not really a democracy.
Yeah. Thank you. Raman?
I have I think what the crazy thing about it is that in the end it helped the film. It helped because it was such a big noise and such a big alarm around the film because of the ban, that it was the biggest marketing campaign you could get. Or wasn't it like that? I know it was a half year of struggling, but I know also that even we got the sentence here in Germany that it was banned because you told the film out of the women's perspective, which is really, you can't have words for that, Anyway, Raman, maybe you have the next question.
Yeah, I mean, while we have been talking about Lipstick Under My Burqa, I mean, first of all, congratulations to you for making such a fantastic movie. Yeah, I watched it myself, lovely movie, and I think the box office also gave you the same message there. Now, I mean, let me take you down the memory lane and ask you a question. How did this project happen? How did you started thinking of these 4 characters? And I mean, are they inspired from some real life characters that you knew? Or were they something that you imagined what would happen? So would you like to share the story behind the curtain here with us?
a really long time back, but yeah, the film is definitely not inspired by any real life characters like that. I think, these characters just kind of, to be very honest, they just emerged in my head on their own along with the title. While I was, the first time I thought of them was, I think, in the middle of, I think I was still shooting my first film, turning 30 at that time, and I just had this sort of thought. I didn't come back to this thought for another couple of years, but the thing is that I do feel, even though, so I had a very liberal kind of upbringing, like a very good education by Indian standards. But I always felt that despite the fact that from the outside I'm totally free, I always felt that there was always something inside me that was, kind of chained and not free and constrained. And I really wanted to explore this idea of what does it really mean to be free? And, and I wanted to sort of explore it not in my world, but in the same idea, but in a different world, a world where there are actually external constraints on one's freedom. And I think that's really where it really came from my own sort of preoccupation with this idea of how free am I? And, and therefore, if I don't feel free, how free can people feel when there are external constraints to their freedom? And how far can people go to, sort of almost steal pieces of freedom from the sort of life that they lead? And then also this whole concept of tradition and modernity, where does the Indian small town woman find herself when, things seem to be changing a lot from the outside, but then, there are so many constraints within the family structure. So I think I was kind of preoccupied with, with all these thoughts. And yeah, and I think I am a sort of like a keeper of stories. That I have very long conversations with many, many people. And I think I know many, many things about many people's lives. And I think things kind of just keep fermenting in my head. So I really can't say where exactly, these characters emerge from, and I can't pinpoint and say this character is this person. But definitely now when I look back, for instance, even Ratna Pathak Shah's character, the Buaji. Now, and I didn't even think about it. Only much later I realized that when I was very young and I was living in Patna, which is this small town in Bihar. Where one of the houses where we were living, right on the top floor, there was a lady who used to live, and she was widowed, and and she was the bua, actually. She was the aunt, and she had been widowed, and she used to wear white, and she'd been totally desexualized in that sense, and she wasn't that old. And later I thought, and I was like, my God, maybe that memory, has been in my head. And then I remember my own grandmother, she was also widowed when she was very young, and she, suddenly she became very I don't, certain things, sometimes I would tell her to wear a brighter sari, and she's like, no, now I've lost my husband, I don't think I should wear such a bright color. And so I think that there are a lot of random things which are there in one's life, which one has experienced, and it kind of, stays with you, and it kind of emerges like that. And the same thing, I met somebody who had come to do a sales pitch in my house. So later I thought that, of course, there are many people who, sort of, they're not the same characters, but you do keep feeling, and it's your own, so I think Lipstick is a very personal film for me. It's very much, I think, about my own inner life, just expressed through the lives of these other women. And I guess I just found some other characters to express a very, very personal truth.
Yeah. How easy or difficult it was to convince the people to work for such a bold movie from that time? I mean, 2017, when you were releasing this movie, when you told the story, was it people were enthusiastic to work in such a project, or did you have to really struggle getting people ready for such a movie?
Honestly, it was not a struggle because of the kind of people I approached. Ratna was my first choice to play Buaji's character, Usha's character. She agreed immediately. Konkana was my first choice for Shireen. She agreed immediately. For the other two younger girls, we did a lot of auditions. And So to be very honest, I didn't have to do any convincing, but I think it's also because me and our casting director, we did zero in on people who we knew would, resonate with this kind of a film. I think I also didn't go to somebody who may have felt that fear. And in my experience, there are a lot of, now it's become better, but there are a lot of times when you go to a female actor, and then they themselves are very scared of, I think now it's changing, but like doing films which are just centered on women, in fact. So there's also that feeling that, oh, I don't know, I should be in a film where there are, male actors and all, so that, like, we don't know what will happen. So, but I think like it was also who we approached and who we thought of. They were people, I don't know, maybe subliminally I knew that they'll, at least understand the space of the film.
Yeah, no, thank you. Stefan?
Yeah, so you mentioned the freedom of expression. Do you feel a difference in working in the creative environment and working for a streaming service in comparison to working for the big screen and working for the cinema?
So, I mean, I can only speak from an Indian context. I think like with a feature, even with my new feature, Dolly Kitty, I've made the film that I wanted to make. But I do feel growing up in India, you grew up with certain cultural realities. And very often I feel like there's a lot of self-censorship that happens in any case. So there are things that you don't even think of putting into your script or even write in your script, because you know that this is India and it's not going to pan out like that. So I think like someone like me, I anyway suffer from self-censorship. I can't even, assess it myself, but I know I live in India. I know I live in a certain kind of country. There's a certain kind of audience and there are certain kind of, nudity, for instance. I've never written a scene with nudity because in my head, I'm like, how will I don't know, it's already going on in your head that in India, how will you show it? How can you shoot it, etc. So the OTT platforms, like a streaming service, is very freeing in the sense that you don't have to wait outside that censor board office, like you're on trial, which is really how it is. You feel like a criminal and you're waiting for them to somehow pass your work. And I don't think any filmmaker should go through what we go through vis-a-vis censorship. It doesn't make any sense. So I think like the fact that layer is like missing, and you, at least right now it's missing, and that you don't have to finish your work, like finish your film and then wait and see what the chaperones of Indian society are going to tell you. I think that's very, very freeing. I worked on a show called Made in Heaven, which I wrote along with Zoya and Rima, and which I directed 2 episodes of. And I think that kind of a show, for instance, I think like that couldn't have been a film. I don't think that, any like a censor board would have passed that kind of material. But I feel it's such an important show in the Indian context. And when we were making it, the law also hadn't yet changed. So that kind of freedom of thought, that we wanted to make this show, and the fact that we could was possible because it was for a streaming platform. But yeah, but I feel already, like I'm saying, so that happens sometimes, and there's a very important thematic that you feel you can't address in a feature because it won't be passed. But otherwise, I feel like I've just finished another series for Netflix, and I do feel, for instance, that like that could have been like it would have been this, even if that was not a series format, it was a feature, it would have been the same. So it, I guess, depends from story to story. But definitely it's nice to know that your cut will be the cut, and you don't have to suddenly remove some shots or change some words. And more than that, just the feeling that you don't have to stand outside, you're just waiting for somebody to pass judgment on your work. Are they going to pass it? It's a very humiliating experience actually for a filmmaker, and I think it should not be there at all.
Anjana?
या आपने अभी बताया मेड इन हेवन, जिसमें आप लेखिका भी हैं और निर्देशिका भी हैं। आपने उसमें भी कई सामाजिक मुद्दों के बारे में बातचीत की है उस सीरीज में, जैसे होमोसेक्सुअलिटी या बड़ी उम्र में शादी या यौन उत्पीड़न उत्पीड़न और भारतीय दर्शकों की कैसी प्रतिक्रिया रही इसमें भारतीय दर्शक इसको कैसा देख रहे हैं?
Yeah. So just to translate it in English, so Made in Heaven, I mean, you are the writer and director of this series. And this series is touching a lot of social topics like sexual abuse, homosexuality, and marriage in later part of life and so on. Now, how has been the reaction of Indian audience towards Made in Heaven?
Well, Made in Heaven has been really, really well received. It's a huge success in India, and I think also for a lot of audiences, not in South Asian audiences abroad. So I think it's been a very, very fulfilling experience. It was also a very collaborative experience because with the series it's never just one person. It's Zoya and Rima created the series, and I'm really happy that I got to sort of work with them on it. But I think we didn't know what to expect. Actually, we weren't sure at all as to what's going to happen when the when the show comes out, where the people, like, literally we just had no idea, like, how are people going to sort of receive it. So I think it's gotten a lot of love, and it's been very beautiful actually. There are so many people who actually come out to their families by showing them the show, and we just have got like a lot of love for this show. So I think which is why the previous thing that I was saying, that if you give audiences something to chew upon, they will. But like, we should have the opportunity to give it to them, and they have to be oriented towards watching more stuff. So like, I think the success of a show like Made in Heaven does tell you that an audience is ready for all kinds of stories.
मैं आगे पूछ सकती हूँ? Ja,
Ja.
darf ich weiterfragen?
Ja.
Weil das genau da. आपने इस सीरीज को, या आपकी टीम, बिग फैट इंडियन वेडिंग पे आधारित किया गया था इसको, कोई इसका खास कारण है? मुझे ये सीरीज जो है काफी कुछ याद दिला रही थी फिल्म मानसून वेडिंग की। क्या अब ये समय नहीं है कि हम इस दिखावे की दुनिया से बाहर आएं?
Yeah. Let me now translate it in English. So Made in Heaven, I mean, based on Big Fat Indian Wedding. So when Anjana ji was watching it, it reminded her of the film Monsoon Wedding. So the key question here is it not the time when we come out of the world of show off?
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like marriages are very important, in India, in a certain setting and all of that. But I think it's a great time to, it's a great moment where things unravel for families, actually, where there are fights and suddenly secrets are revealed, and you see people's insecurities, and so it's a very interesting emotional moment for a family, and a very interesting sort of event through which to look at Indian society, which is what our attempt was, that the facade of who we want to say we are, who we actually are. And I think really the core of it, that marriage is a very patriarchal institution actually. Not always, but by and large, so I mean, and marriage was not necessarily marriage per se, but also like the whole idea of this very expensive wedding in India, where all these kind of systems of dowry and like forced marriages, etc., exist. So I think it was a very interesting lens through which to look at Indian society, which is what we try to do. But also, it is a time of joy as well, for families to come together. But it's just that things are not what they seem, and everything is very sort of layered. And I do think that at this point in time, we should be more self-reflective as a society about where we are and who we are, and how much inequality there really sort of is, and how the kind of biases that sort of exist, which is what the show tries to sort of explore.
Stefan?
Yeah, I have one question. We can stay with Made in Heaven. My question is, you said it was also received very, very successful internationally. So is it correct that it's like the most watched Indian web series which is out at the moment, or is it, am I wrong with that?
Well, so the thing is, they don't tell, no one knows anything about, but like we do know that it's definitely one of the most watched, it's one of the most successful Indian web series for internationally. But yeah, I think exact numbers and stuff nobody knows. But the kind of like we have got that feedback that it's really been very, very well received. I don't know about the other shows, but definitely Made in Heaven is, it has had an impact. I think a lot of, also for a lot of South Asian audiences, I think like they're seeing a sort of representation of Desi culture that is more modern, and still seeing the stuff that they like to see. So I think there is that. And also for audiences that are not South Asian, I think it's very interesting to see a very strong element of Indian culture, which is like the big wedding, the big Indian wedding. But then to see it not just as that, but to see actually, it's like peeling off the onion, to really see the layers of many dynamics at play and how nothing is great, like nothing is as fantastical or as bad as we think it is.
Yeah, so my question was going in that direction because I had a lot of laughs, and so I was laughing a lot watching the series, and I thought it's really perfect for something new coming from India to spread the word. Yeah, how weddings are celebrated in India. That's really great. I have a question for your new film. You already mentioned it. You mentioned the title, Dolly Kitty Ovo Shamakti Satari. And are there any news on when the film will be released?
We're just figuring out what's going to happen, but we're really in unprecedented times. We were going to have the film premiered last year at Busan. Mm-hmm. And we did have like a full festival. So we did a couple of festivals this year as well, one in Amsterdam and Glasgow. And we had like a festival run that was planned, but all the festivals started getting cancelled. Our theatrical release was supposed to be mid-June. But the theaters have been shut. So now we're just reconfiguring and figuring out what to do, just like all the other films that are, have to change your plans and figure out what to do.
Yeah, I'm also asking because I would love to get the film for our upcoming IndoGerman Filmweek, because we decided to have a physical film week at Babylon, which you see behind me, at the end of September. So that would be great. But let's talk about that later, because I think we have
I would love for it to be shown.
We have to clear that between us first and then go public with that. Okay, Raman or Anjana.
Please. Yeah. If I may, yeah. So, I mean, one thing that I read in one of your interviews, when you entered into Bollywood, you felt like you were the only woman on a male-dominated set. Now, one thing I would like to ask you is, in all the years that you have spent in Bollywood, has it changed, or do you still see that a new entrant woman in Bollywood will have to go through the same challenge? I mean, one thing that I would like to quote here is, it was very interesting to read. You had mentioned that you had to actually shout at the sets to be heard when you started. Yeah. So is it still the same, or has it changed now?
Things have changed a lot. So when I started working as an assistant, I think it was 2003. So there were only 3 girls on the set on that film. There was me, there was a costume assistant, and there was a hairdresser. And 3 of us were staying together in one room. And it was a crew of almost 250 people. And there were 3 of us. So it was, of course, but the strange thing is, at that time, I didn't think it's odd, because, it was just the way it was. But of course, like, it was, now when I think about it, it's very weird. Like, why were there, but that was the composition of sets at that time in India. There were hardly any women on set. And things started changing, a few years after that. But I think a couple of years after that is, I think, when I was shouting, that was my first film as a chief assistant director. That was Apharan. And of course, like, I lost my voice completely because, and I didn't realize, again, these are things you realize in retrospect, because I felt like if I don't, like, I developed a very, no, I guess it was always in me or whatever, but I was very harsh on a set. The way I was run a set, I would really scream at people. I was like trying to instill fear. I was like, I felt like that was the only way I would be able to run the set. If everyone is afraid of me and they hear my loud voice. And also, of course, this is after being on top of my work, like after making sure that, I know exactly my job and I'm not like, there are no mistakes in terms of, but I did feel like, because as a first AD, you have to control the set. You have to make sure, background actors are in place, whatever's required, you have to call the shot. So I did feel that I needed to be very, like my personality was like, I had to bring out like the loudest part of my personality, which now I feel it was just a reaction, I guess, because there were hardly any women on set. And it shouldn't be required at all. And to be very honest, the moment I started directing, I never felt that need at all. And it was just fine, because by that time also there were many more women on set. And also then I didn't like, it was fine because I was the director. But yeah, so I think these are experiences which you think about later. Now, of course, it's very different. There are many, many more women on a set. But is it equal? No, it's not. There are hardly any women cinematographers. There are hardly any women sound recorders. Even in terms of women who are the chief assistant or like the first assistant directors, there are many more men normally who get that job than women. So it's still, it's still not the same. But of course, it's very, very different. So at that time, like, a woman couldn't even do makeup on a film set because, the Makeup Association insisted that only men would be allowed to do makeup. So there have been so many issues that, about female technicians on a set. So it's really changing. And I think the more women directors there are, the more things change, because they'll always end up hiring more women. And the more women heads of department there are, the more women directors there will be. The more female assistant directors there are, the more women will be directors in the future. So it's all kind of connected. For me, I think eventually there can only be change where, like 50% of all films are made by women is what I feel like. Until it's 50-50, nothing is changing.
Okay. No, thank you. Thank you for Anjana ji.
अगर हम आज बात करें इस समय की, तो आजकल पूरी दुनिया किसी न किसी तरह की उथल पुथल है पूरी दुनिया में, और बॉलीवुड भी उससे अछूता नहीं रहा है अभी. क्या आप क्या कहती हैं, हम पूरे समाज को क्या संदेश देंगी, खास तौर से एक नारी को, कि हम अपना अच्छा योगदान इस समय कैसे दें, क्या करें इस समय हम?
So to translate it in English, in current times where the world is facing a lot of turbulence, I mean, Bollywood is also going through some tough times. So how can the society, and especially a woman, contribute positively in the current times?
It's a very deep and a tough question. So I would say the first thing, to be very honest, for any person, I think we shouldn't pretend that, times are normal. I think it's most important to, first of all, acknowledge that we are not in normal circumstances, and we should acknowledge that we are in a sort of turbulent situation. And I think from that acknowledgement comes the fact that I think this is the time to not put pressure on ourselves to either be super productive, or I think like the focus should be on managing your physical health and your emotional health. I think that's the biggest contribution anybody can make, is first just take care of yourself in terms of your health, like, your emotional, your mental health, your physical health. I think honestly, like, just taking care of your own well-being, I think, is the most important thing, number one. And the second thing is, I think, kindness. I think this is a tough time for everybody in the world, and I think this is really a time for kindness, compassion, empathy, and I think, I mean, far beyond any industry, whatever you do, whether you're in the shipping industry or you're a lawyer or a filmmaker, I think this is the time to really be able to, give hope and encouragement and joy to another person's life, rather than bringing other people sort of down. So I think like it's a time for human beings to help each other out through this crisis. It's really not a time to pull each other down. For women, I think it's been especially hard because of the various lockdowns in different countries. Especially India, I feel like for women, sometimes it's really like the load of the entire, housework has come on them. There are rising instances of domestic abuse. So I feel women are really facing the brunt of it because, and I personally know of women who really are having to manage like children, their jobs, online schooling, and like cook for the family, and, not enough support from male members of the family who I feel give token support, but not like fully, in the trenches helping them out. So I think it's a difficult time for everybody, particularly women. And I think being kind to oneself and kind to others is the most important thing. And I really don't know what else to sort of say, but I feel, as female filmmakers, I think right now, I guess all other identities kind of, I feel from my perspective, subside. And right now, I think it's really just about, who you are as a person and as a human being. And I think like to be more humane is the most important thing.
Alankrita, how about the preparation for the second season of Made in Heaven? So the scripts are ready, okay, but preparations are done, so you can start shooting once COVID-19 is over, or how does it look like?
My lips are sealed. I can't speak about season 2 because we have confidentiality process, so there's nothing I won't be able to comment on that.
Okay, Alankrita, thank you so much. That was a really great 1-hour talk with you. Thank you for all your insights. Thank you for the great time we have had with you in that live talk. And thanks to Anjana, thanks to Raman.
Yeah, thank you. I would like to mention one thing. I mean, I really loved this talk. Really, some insights that we touched upon. So thank you very much, Alankrita, for your time here and your sharing your thoughts with us. Thank you.
Thank you so much. It was such a lovely evening, and I really enjoyed having this conversation. Thank you so much.